Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Welsh Republic Podcast, episode 152 today. And I am here with my guest, Slava from the Revolutionary Report. How are you doing today, Slava? Is everything good with you?
Yes, hi, I'm doing good. Thank you for inviting me.
What have you been up to today? Anything much?
Well, today was one of those lazy days. I was actually just taking it easy and relaxing with the family. I can only do that on Sunday, unfortunately, because, I'm working, I have a family, I have two children, two daughters, and as a mother, my schedule is pretty full. So the whole week is kind of busy, and on Sunday I can actually relax.
Oh, it's really good, to have one of those days where you just want to relax, especially when it comes to working in politics, because politics just gets the better of you and it's just overwhelming. Sometimes I need a break from it, but it's always good to have a rest, and always take things easy, which is good,
Yeah, so true. You need to balance things in life because if you do too much of something, then you can get a burnout and it's not good for anyone, right? It's not
Yeah.
good for that cause that you're investing in and you're doing because, if you did a lot and then you stop, it's going to hurt the cause. And it's not good for your family if you're doing too much of something else, right? So it's hard to balance things, but I'm trying to learn and do my best.
Yeah. So, Slava, tell me about yourself. So, how long have you been a political person for? How long have you been how long have you been a political person for? What is your background into journalism? What was your journey into socialism? And yeah, give us your background and good.
Sure. So, I'm Slava. That's my real name. Some people think it's a nickname, but no, I was born as Slava, which means glory, by the way. And I'm sure you've heard that slogan, Slava Ukraini, which means glory to Ukraine.
Yeah.
So I was born in Western Ukraine. Ukrainian is my first language. Then later on I learned Russian, of course. And at the age of 21, I immigrated to the United States. So now I live in Chicago. I have a family here. And in my youth, I was not into politics. I was a highly religious person. I was Jehovah's Witness, by the way. So I was going door to door preaching religion. And I didn't care about politics because Jehovah's Witnesses are not interested in politics. They actually prohibit their members from looking into politics. So I didn't know nothing. I just knew who is the president. That's all. But then when I moved here, I got married and my husband was into politics. My husband is Marxist, and he, little by little, he taught me, he kind of made me interested in politics, especially because we started dating in 2013, and that's the year when things started getting ugly in Ukraine. So I was really confused. I didn't know what to think. My back home country is on fire, right? It was Maidan
Yeah.
revolution, as they call, which we know it was a coup. It was actually not an organic uprising. But back then I was confused. I didn't know what to think. So my husband, being like knowledgeable about politics, and he slowly explained to me what's happening, and I started learning and I started analyzing. And so this was 11 years ago, and little by little I build my way into politics. But really what made me think that I need to be active and actually talk about my experience and the fact that I'm Ukrainian, it's when special military operations started. So 2 years ago in 2022, that's when I started really like going in and digging deep and talking to people and like saying, that what's happening in Ukraine is not what the Western media is saying is happening.
Mm.
Like it's actually the other way around. So basically, the last 2 years, I have been most active, but I started my way into politics like about 10 years ago.
Wow, 10 years. That's a long, long time, and you've been really, Ukraine is really one of these countries that is really going for a bit of a rough time right now. And it's just, especially, I've heard that Ukraine right now is introducing a new military bill. Can you explain that is? Because that new military bill that they're building, like that they're making. Tell me about that and all the deal, because it seems so dystopian to me. Can you give the audience details about that new military draft bill?
Yeah. Yeah, this new mobilization bill was in the making for the past few months. They have been slowly prepping the population, the public of Ukraine, because, it's not easy to pass something that draconian, right? So they were little by little preparing the population and saying, okay, we're going to lose this war. We must up the game, we must draft more people and do more and more. So little by little, they were introducing these like amendments to the bill and building up. And there were, I think, 4,000 pages. The whole bill was 4,000 pages. It was crazy. It was
That's
long.
a long bill. 4,000 pages? Wow, for a bill?
Yeah. So it included so many different things. Not all of them have passed, and I'll explain what things have passed and what didn't. So the things that are going to go in effect pretty soon. So I think 60 days from the time that the bill was passed. So that's the beginning of June, I think, all of the things go into effect. Some of them went earlier, in about a month's period. So a month after the bill was signed. So first of all, the draft age was lowered from 27 to 25. So all men at the age of 25 now are being drafted. And they're drafting men even younger, but they're finding some excuses and loopholes in the law. But legally speaking, they can only draft men who are 25 or older. Of course, there are some exceptions, like if you have more than 3 children, if you are sick, like, disability and stuff. But they're keep adding, like they keep before regular disability was enough, but now they're saying, okay, we have to reevaluate that. So part of this new bill is that every man who had disability has to go through the reevaluation again, and now they're going to be more strict, and they're going to kind of pick on people and say, oh, are you sure you're that sick? Like, things that I saw in the bill were horrific, like cancer that in remission. Like, if you don't have an active cancer, if you have a tumor that's like slowly growing but it's not a big deal, they can draft you. Mental disorders, they are drafting people with Down syndrome and other syndromes.
Yes, I saw that video of that young person. It was disgusting. It was absolutely disgusting. You know what's even messed up, Salva? You have videos of 13-year-old Ukrainian boys being kidnapped it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. But like you were saying, and also with the bill, what other facts do you think people should know about, like, really about it?
And I just wanted to add one thing about what you said about children being kidnapped. I just recently I wrote an article about it at the Revolution Report, how Azov Battalion, they forged the papers of a 16-year-old to present him as the 18-year-old. And this 16-year-old boy, he was killed, and only when he was killed, it came out that he's actually 16, not 18. So yeah, they have been doing these crazy things. Regarding the draft, the mobilization bill, one of the most funny things, and by funny I'm sarcastic, but is that every man who's abroad, how immigrants or refugees, people who live outside of Ukraine, some of them who live longer, they have received their local documents, right? Like green card in the United States or passport or other legal documentation. But most people who just recently arrived, right, as refugees, they don't have any papers. The only thing they have is like a refugee card or something like that. So they rely heavily on their Ukrainian documents, their Ukrainian passport, birth certificate, and so on and so on. So this new bill, this mobilization bill, Part of it is that all consulate services are going to be stopped for men of military age in all countries around the world. So no matter where you are, in what country you are, if you're a Ukrainian man, you won't be able to renew your passport, your Ukrainian passport, or do any other documentation if you don't have military registration. And in order to do military registration, you have to go to Ukraine. And then if you go to Ukraine and do that registration, they're going to draft you. So basically, these people, I mean, they're going to lose their paperwork, right? It's going to expire. Their passports and other stuff is going to expire. They won't be able to travel anywhere. They will be trapped in that one location where they are. And if they're lucky and they get some help from the adopted country, the country who welcomed them, then, if they get any paperwork done, then it's good for them. But unfortunately, from what I've been hearing lately, Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, Germany, all these European countries who have been screaming, yelling, we're welcoming all the Ukrainian refugees, we're going to help everyone. Now they're saying, we're going to help Ukrainian government to send you back. So if Ukraine requests these men to be sent back, we will accommodate Ukrainian government and we will send. So it's just such a hypocrisy, and it's such a painful thing to observe, because these people, they were running, they didn't want to be drafted, they didn't want to die for for Zelensky, right? So they thought they found refuge, and now these countries are saying, go back and die, because we don't want to die for Ukraine, so you have to go. It's so horrific. I watch all this and I'm so disappointed. And on one thing though, I can notice that more and more people, Ukrainian people, are slowly like opening their eyes. Like they're little by little. In the beginning, they were all so pro-Ukraine, pro-Zelensky. They were supporting the government because they thought they're gonna, with the help of United States, they will win the war, because that's what they've been hearing. The whole Western world were promising that you're going to win, Russia will lose. And now, the longer the war is going, they're losing that hope, and they're realizing that they're being used as pawns basically in this game. So I'm happy to witness that some people who before were arguing with me and saying, you're not right, you're wrong, now they're like, oh, you were right, Zelensky is corrupted. So there's something positive happening, a little change.
By the way, the Revolutionary Report stepped in. Hi, Revolutionary Report. Nice to see you. But by the way, guys, sorry to interrupt. By the way, make sure you guys check out Slava on Twitter and check out the Revolutionary Report. They're very good, fantastic page. But like you were saying, Slava, going back to that, sorry, promoting your work and their work, just to be nice. Sorry about that. So right now, as we all know, Ukraine is obviously on its last legs. The Western media is now reporting that Ukraine is losing. It's collapsing. It's just pretty much sending people to the grinder. Slava, as a Ukrainian yourself, how do you see this war ending? Do you see it in a way like where the Ukrainians rise up, or like a fraction of the Ukrainian military decides to like overthrow Lizinski, or do you think he'll get assassinated by the CIA? And whatever judging happens, what do you think will happen to Ukraine? Do you think some parts of it will go to Poland or Hungary? What do you think will happen to Eastern Ukraine? And what do you think will happen to Western Ukraine? What do you think will happen to Western Ukraine? And what do you think will happen to Eastern Ukraine after the war is done? And how do you think Ukraine will be like in the multipolar world going forward? And do you think Russia will take Western? So how do you see it going forward politically and socially?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I don't have like one answer, because there's so many possibilities, right? Depending on how the rest of the geopolitics will play out. Like, Ukraine is not doing anything on its own. We know that United States is telling them what to do, and they're heavily relying on the help from the United States also. we see that as soon as Ukraine starts losing, there's another front is being like they're trying to open another front for Russia in Georgia, right? So depending on how that will play out, I think will determine the future of Ukraine. So if another war will start in Georgia, this can be maybe like a frozen conflict for a little, put on hold. It could play out like that. We know that just recently they received a ton of help. That bill was passed in the United States was, I think, $60 billion for Ukraine only. That will help them.
62, something like that. But
yeah, I think that will probably help them to last another few months. They're planning on doing some counteroffensive again, which is silly because we know how badly the last one was, right? How many thousands and thousands of Ukrainian men died because of the ambitions of Ukrainian generals. About Western Ukraine, I don't think Russia is interested in Western Ukraine because the whole premise of, in the beginning, right, of the special military operation is that, they came to a defense of Russian-speaking population in the east, in Donbass area. Those people were under attack from the Ukrainian government for 8 long years. And they were suffering from constant shelling, bombing. They were abused by Ukrainian fake government, the coup government that came to power in 2014. So, it took 8 years for Russia to prepare for that moment, right? And to finally take that step to defend Donbass. And I think they are interested in Donbass, and most likely, they already have Crimea. And they already have Donbass, frankly speaking, right? Those states are not completely taken, right? So there are some areas, some regions that they still have to take control of to have complete states. But what I think is going to happen probably towards the end of this year, it seems like to me that Russia may take Odessa. So Odessa is also heavily Russian, right? It's always been. I remember going to Odessa when I was 6. My mom took me out of my, little place where I was living in Carpathian Mountains, which is like southwest of Ukraine, close to Poland. And everybody in that region spoke Ukrainian only, so I've never even heard Russian. And I remember at the age of 6 going to Odessa, and I heard Russian, and I'm like, what is this language? I thought it's Ukraine. And then she's like, no. Yeah. So I learned that we actually have 2 languages, and lots of people in the south and east speak Russian. So I think Odessa is important for Russia, and they will try to take it, especially because I'm sure you've heard of Transnistria, which is like a small part between Moldova and Odessa. And that area, which is it's a country that's not recognized by the West, but it is recognized by Russia. And they have Russia has some peace troops, I think, there to kind of prevent Moldova from taking over that part. And it would make sense for Russia to take Odessa region. That way they will have a land bridge all the way to Transnistria. Also, recently 2 other parts of Moldova, one is called Gagauzia, and another one, I don't remember the name. But those 2 small parts, small regions of Moldova also voiced their concerns of safety, and they asked Russia for help because they're saying that Moldova is infringing on their rights and not allowing them to practice their, language and other human rights and stuff like that. So we may see that development on the south of Ukraine, Odessa region, from Kherson to Odessa and to Transnistria. That's a possibility. Another thing is we've been hearing from Russian side that they want to have some sort of a gray area, right? Like an area that would be a division between the territories that will belong to Russia and then the whatever is going to be left of Ukraine. So I think that because Western Ukraine is highly nationalistic, they hate everything Russian. Most likely that those few Western states will be the actual Ukraine eventually. And then the middle, like the central Ukraine, will be that gray area to divide. I'm not sure if Poland will actually accept Ukraine and or Hungary because there are a lot of tensions between Polish and Ukrainian people. Um, we have a shared common history, just like with Russia. We have a shared history with Poland, and especially the Western Ukraine, because Ukraine was part of Soviet Union before, but not all of Ukraine was part of Soviet Union from the beginning. So Central and Eastern Ukraine became part of Soviet Union in 1922, but Western Ukraine was with Poland after World War I, and they became part of Soviet Union only after Hitler lost, Germany lost, and on that territory where I'm from, Western Ukraine, there were lots of collaborators. So all the Bandera type people, so Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, and so similar to those, they were helping, they were collaborating with Hitler because they were hoping that Hitler will allow them to have an independent little country. But of course, Hitler was using them, and they realized that probably at the end. And after World War II, that area also became part of Soviet Union. And that's why there's such a big difference in mentality between East and West Ukraine, because they haven't been together for too long. They've been always part of, like, separated. And remember when Tucker Carlson did an interview with Putin, and and how Putin gave him like a lesson in history?
Oh, that was funny. That was really funny. That was, and everyone just made a meme about it. And it's like, there's a funny meme of that where Putin is listening, and then Putin will where Putin's talking for 15 minutes, and then Tucker's like, huh? Still after that.
Yeah.
It was a good interview. Okay.
Putin really goes into like a history between Ukraine and Russia, and there are a few moments where I disagree with Putin because, and it's so understandable, every nation tries to portray the history that would like benefit their country, right? So listening to him talking, I caught hints of national chauvinism, Russian national chauvinism, which I always see Ukrainian national chauvinism too on the Ukrainian side, right? So I personally disagree with both. Like I don't like when Ukrainians say, "Oh, Kiev and Rus is just, it's ours, it's our ancestry, and it belongs to us, and we can claim it," and all that. I hate when they do that because that's not right. And when Russians are denying the existence of Ukrainian and they're saying, "Oh no, that was all Russia," that's also not correct. So I like to point to things the way, like, I try to look objectively. Of course, I'm going to have some bias, but I try to be as objective as possible and say, how about we share the common history? Like, Kiev and Rus was the beginning of both of our nations, not even both, three nations, Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. From that time, that's like 1,000 years ago, right? During these 1,000 years ago, we were together separate, and it was lots of different changes, and that's why there's difference in mentality, and that's why all these different dialects formed, right? Different languages. In Kiev and Rus, everybody was speaking one old Slavic language, and then from that language all these languages have developed. So we are the same people. If you really get to the bottom of this, originally we were the same people, but then we moved apart, and that doesn't mean we have to fight and have wars, but unfortunately it's not like people of Ukraine and Russia have decided, just like Western media is saying, oh, Putin just woke up one day, decided to attack Ukraine. That's not how things happen. There was a lot of foreign influence. Unfortunately, United States and Western imperialism, they have been meddling in Ukraine for so long. I'm sure most of your audience is familiar with Maidan, was the coup that happened in 2014, but it goes further than that. I was still in Ukraine when Orange Revolution happened. That was 2004. And that was the first time that, with the help of foreign influence in Ukraine, things like took a wrong turn, right? And I think if you really analyze the history, you can see that from the dissolution of the Soviet Union, as soon as that happened, Russia was becoming slowly developing into the strong power. And in order to, the United States didn't want to allow Russia to become a strong power, because that's why they were happy that Soviet Union collapsed. So they were trying to meddle in these other countries that surrounded Russia, right? Just to have influence and do not allow them to cooperate with Russia. So they were doing all kinds of things, training different militia groups, those that now have became Right Sector, Azov Battalion, and others. That was all done starting in 90s. Can you believe that?
I know. That's pretty interesting. Wow, that's crazy. So, Slava, I saw that the Revolutionary Report did a very good documentary. And, as a Western person myself, it was about the Donbass genocide. The Donbass genocide, is that correct? I am so blown away as a Western person myself that taxpayer money is going towards these Nazis from the West. So tell me about that documentary. Tell me about the facts that the Western people should know about the Donbass genocide, the Azov Rebellion. Also, can you tell me what crimes did the Azov Rebellion do to the ethnic Russians in Donbass from 2014 to 2022, and also can you mention the facts, and also can you as yourself mention one of the horror stories that one of the neo-Nazis did to any of the ethnic Russians there, when the Donbass genocide of 2014 2020, a horror, a story of someone dying, or a very well-known story of an ethnic Russian being killed by the Ukrainian military in Donbass. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Donbass, it's really, I feel so bad for people living there because they've suffered for so long. I have my aunt lives in Donetsk, and she has been living there for all these years. So I was the only one speaking to her. Unfortunately, my whole family from Western Ukraine decided to not communicate with her because she was, against what Ukrainian government was doing. So they started calling her, Russian agent and stuff like that, and even worse, derogatory terms. So she's banned, discommunicated from the family, unfortunately. And so she's been telling me, the horrors and how they would target civilians. They would target bus stop. They know people are trying to get to work in the morning, right? 8 a.m., 9 a.m. in the morning. People are standing on bus stops, children trying to get to school. They would target the most busiest streets, where people waiting for their transportation, just to kill the most amount of people. It's horrifying how they were trying to basically break these people. And I remember former president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko. He has this infamous speech where he was saying that our children will go to school and yours will sit in the basement and hide from bombs and stuff like that. He was like, so like he was really trying to tell those people that you're nobody, like you're subhuman, you're different sort of human. They were calling them roaches and other they were trying to dehumanize them. And you know what's interesting is, like, lots of people ask me, like, how could a Ukrainian army go and start killing their own people? And they didn't want to, because they had family members living there, and they just didn't want to go against people who just recently they were living together, right? So that's why Ukrainian government brought in these militia groups like Azov Battalion, like Aidar Battalion, Right Sector, and there's so many of them. So these battalions, they were trained by CIA, by NATO, and they were trained to be like killer machines, do not have any feelings, and just brainwashed to kill. So they were told that these are not humans, these are anybody who's pro-Russia or has like solidarity with Russia, we must eliminate them from this holy land. Like the brainwashing, the level of brainwashing, it's like it's so similar to the Nazi Germany. They were like these people really believe that they are special kind of race, Aryans or whatever, that they are better on a DNA level. They're better than Russians. They would call Russians orcs and Mongols and all kinds of things, right? So when they would get a hold of anybody who they deemed as a collaborator or a sympathizer with Russia, they would do so many crazy things. I mean, we've seen crucifying incidents. We've seen like ISIS type of all kinds of crimes. It's horrible. Like I can't even speak about it. It's like giving me goosebumps even thinking about the crimes that I have seen. And before special military operations started, once in a while, the Western media would admit that yes, Ukraine has a Nazi problem. They would, because it was just too much to hide. Like it was so horrible that even ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, right? They were saying, oh yeah, Azov is neo-Nazi, like far right, because they were going even after Jewish people in Ukraine too. They really believe that in this purity of race. So they wanted to like eliminate all the impurities. They wanted to create pure Ukrainian race, everybody to speak just Ukrainian, stuff like that. So Western media once in a while would admit that yes, these crimes are happening, and as soon as the special military operation started in 2022, it kind of, they forgot about it, and they're like, no. ADL came out and said, no, Azov is actually good guys now. And they're glorifying them now. They're calling them heroes and stuff like that. So we can see that it's kind of, it's hard for an average American or a European person to see through this propaganda, because they work day and night to mislead people and not, to tell them that it's Russia is bad and Ukrainians are on the good side.
Speaking of Donbass and that, right now there is something going on in Georgia. Like there apparently is like the Western media, because Georgia, obviously the Georgian government, like, sorry, I'm not an expert on Georgia, but I did hear about the war of 2008 and how that was like about the West. But going back to Georgia, like apparently they're wanting to pass a foreign bill, but then the Western media is like, oh, this is unlawful, this is Russian, influence and stuff like that. So tell me, like, what's going on in Georgia? What's the story behind that, and what's the facts that people should know about? Like, and what would you say is the real hypocrisy going on in the Georgian coup right now?
Yeah, so this is not the first time they're trying to pass this foreign agent bill. So this law that they're trying to pass is about media organizations or any non-profit organizations. If more than 20% of their income is coming from abroad, they must register as foreign agent. And it's not some draconian law. It's not something that they came up with out of the blue. This law exists in United States from 1920s, and it exists in European countries and all across the world. I think most countries in the world have some sort of, something similar to this law, because no country wants a foreign entity to influence their media, right? Well, United States and Western imperialism, they do want to influence Georgian politics, right? So they are against this law to be passed. But the way they're going about it, they're saying, "Oh, it's Russian influenced," because Russia has also this law. So they're saying, "Oh, it's Russian law. It's Russian influenced law." And last year in March, the parliament introduced this law, and there were protests and lots of pressure from the West, and like threatening with sanctions and stuff like that. So they backed up. They didn't pass that law. They caved in. And my colleague Donald Quarter, he's the editor-in-chief of the Revolution Report. He went to Georgia last year in March, and he went there, and he didn't he tried to not speak Russian, because people were like, they really didn't like anybody speaking Russian. So he's pretended like he's American only, he doesn't know Russian, and he spoke to people in English, and he interviewed some of them, and they were so misled. They kept claiming that, oh, it's Russian, Russian, Russian. And when he asked them that no other countries have it, they're like, that's not true. So they're, even though, I mean, this information is out there in the open, you can just search it on Google, right? And you will see. But for some reason, Georgian people are led to believe that this is all because of Russia. And funny enough, this year, when the protests had started again a few weeks ago, right? Donald again wanted to go to Georgia to cover what's happening and to speak to people. And can you believe what happened to him? They detained him. Like, upon arrival, as soon as he got there, he was taken into a room, questioned, and he was prohibited to enter the country. His passport was taken away. His phone was taken away.
Wow,
He was
that's
interrogated.
crazy.
Yeah, it was so crazy. Good thing that they didn't know he had a laptop in his backpack. So when they put him in this room by himself for like 6 hours, he was there, not knowing what's happening. But at least he had his laptop, and he was able to message me and other people from RT, because his day job is RT. And so he let them know what's happening, and they were able to call Russian embassy in Georgia, and eventually he was let go. Well, not let go in Georgia. They deported him. They sent him out. And when they deport someone, they have to say a reason. They didn't say a reason, so they gave him a paper which he was supposed to sign, but good thing he didn't. That listed all kinds of criminal things, that why you would be banned from entering the country, like if you did something wrong, illegal. And then in the end, it says other, and for him, they picked that other reason, which means no reason. We're not gonna tell you the reason, but we know the reason. The reason is because last year he was talking about it. Like he went and he filmed, and we actually made a video that's on the Revolution Report. It's called the Color Revolution Doctrine, and you can watch it on our channel. It starts as all the filming that Don did in Georgia, but then we go into detail why what's happening in Georgia is a color revolution attempt, because it's very similar to what was happening in Ukraine and other countries. And why we can say it's similar, because back then, last year, and right now, if you look closely at the protest, first of all, if there's a protest against a government, why would you see signs done in a foreign language, in English, right? If they're
Yep.
trying to protest their own government, then their signs should be in Georgian. But if the signs are in English, that means that they're addressing foreign entities. Also, flags, like there should be Georgian flag. Why there is EU flag, American flag, Ukrainian
I
flag?
know. It's like, oh, how the United States just does this is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's so true. So yeah, when you see all these flags and you see all the chants they're doing, and they're just like burning Russian flag and saying death to Russia, and they're like they want United States to come in and and basically do the coup for them, because Georgian parliament is they're trying to they've witnessed what happened in Ukraine, so they're trying to prevent that. But Georgian president, I forgot her name, but it's a lady. She is pro-West, so she's one of those, that United States is controlling her. So I'm assuming that if because in Georgia the parliament has more power than the president, so she will try to fight this law, but in the end, she doesn't have a right to like veto the law. The parliament will make the final decision. And I don't know exactly the steps they have to take. Every country has like in United States they have Congress, then Senate, then it goes back to Congress. It's like complicated. And in Georgia it's something similar. They have all these different steps before a bill becomes the law. So I'm sure if the parliament continues and pushes on to actually adopt this law, we will see some development in protests. So they all start as peaceful, right? And then there's some provocations, like they start throwing bottles at police and stuff like that. So there's the clashes with police happen. And then like when we saw in Ukraine during Maidan, there were these provocateurs who would like throw cocktails, Molotov cocktails into police, right? Or into buildings, and they would burn tires. They would do some like violence, right? So, and remember how in Ukraine there were snipers on the roof, and it was portrayed by Western media as snipers from the Ukrainian government, which was Yanukovych at that time. And they blamed Yanukovych for killing his own peaceful protesters, right? But later on, it came out that it wasn't the government. Those snipers, first of all, the snipers were shooting both protesters and police. And also those snipers, actually, there is a great journalist and professor, Ivan Kachanovsky. He's a Canadian Ukrainian. He did a great research and he published a paper on it. So for anyone who's interested, check out Ivan Kachanovsky. He proved that those snipers were not directed by Yanukovych, the president of that time. It was actually, and there were connections there to Georgia. So it was pro-Western forces who did that, because they, when a protest dies down and nothing is happening, you need a spark. You need something that would kind of take it to a final culmination, So those shootings on Maidan, sniper shootings, were that moment of no return, right? That's when the color revolution became successful. So I'm suspecting that if the Parliament of Georgia doesn't back down again like they did last year, if this continues, we may see some snipers on the roofs. Like, you would assume that they're not going to reuse the same methods, but I think the powers that are in charge right now, they think we have an attention of a goldfish, and we don't remember what happened before, so they keep reusing the same thing. Most likely they're like, why reinvent the wheel, right? If something works, why not use it again? So this color revolution method that they're using, it's basically the same formula, and they're just twitching it a little depending what country they're doing it in, but it's the same thing. We saw that happening in Georgia in 2008. It was called Rose Revolution, when they overthrew the government, and this guy Michael Saakashvili, he became the president, and that guy is something else. He failed, he failed in Georgia, and then they brought him to Ukraine, and he was in Ukraine after the color revolution, helping establish things, and then he failed there. So these puppets that the Western imperialism is using, they're using them to a certain degree, and then when they're done with them, they eliminate them. So I think earlier you were asking me, what do I think will happen with Zelensky, if he's going to be assassinated or not. I think maybe not yet, because, as I said, they just approved another big aid to Ukraine. So once they are done with that and there's nothing left, maybe then he will be eliminated, because they're using they're taking it to as long as it takes, right? Once they exhaust all of the potential of that person, then they eliminate him. So most likely something will happen with Zelensky somewhere down the line, maybe towards the end of the year, I assume.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that is very possible. By the way, Tristan right here just brought up this funny comment for us. And the next question, he says, Azark is vanilla ice.
That's
funny.
True. Mm-hmm. I think there is actually ISIS in Ukraine fighting on behalf of Ukrainian forces. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're training Azov guys and they're teaching them how to do things.
So, speaking about bills, Slava, as of course you may have heard, the United States Congress, obviously it's not passed through the Senate, but it will be passed through the Senate, because there's no way it's going to stop it. It's no way it's going to stop. As we all know, you've heard about the anti-Semitic bill that passed in America, right? You heard about that. So right now, as we all know, the United States Congress just passed one of the most authoritarian bills that I mean, freedom of speech in the United States, you can argue, has been dead for a long time, which it has, but this is definitely going to be the nail in the coffin. This bill is going to basically make it so, denying, basically, if you're going to criticize Israel's, crimes against humanity, which they are committing crimes against the Palestinians, which is one of the worst crimes in human history, basically a racist or hate crime, and basically saying a biblical quote, saying, this killed Jesus. Basically, sorry, I can't pronounce it because it might be TOS on YouTube. Sorry about that. Sorry, but they're even banning a biblical quote from the Bible, which is unbelievable. And they're saying, if you're going to compare Israel to Nazi Germany, which Israel is like Nazi Germany, especially what they're doing to the Palestinians right now, which they've been doing for 75 years or even longer, it's crazy. Because I was on a Twitter space the other day, Slava, and my friend DG Geopolitics, knowing how this bill basically is being pushed, basically knowing how Congress and its members are controlled by AIPAC, they're controlled by the Federal Reserve, knowing how AIPAC gives them so much money, millions of dollars and all that stuff, and knowing that these guys are a traitor to their country because they're pretty much, getting money from a foreign government. My friend DD Geopolitics, shout out to her, by the way, she was on a Twitter space, And she was basically saying, after this bill got passed through the House, she was basically saying that Israel is basically doing like a military coup to America. If you think about it, like this bill is a military coup. Like the Federal Reserve and the global leaders are using this bill as a military coup to take over the United States system. And it's so ridiculous, Slava, to hear all these people, say Israel's our greatest ally, but yet they forget about 9/11, which Israel have a lot of connections to. There's no doubt about that. They forget about 1969, the USS Liberty. They forget about the Balfour Declaration. They forget about the US aid workers that have been killed. So, Slava, going back to that. As I mentioned, the anti-Semitic bill, of course, it's not passed Congress yet, but it will pass the Senate. Like I was saying about that. And by the way, just to let you know, there's actually 4 more anti-Semitic bills. By the way, shout out to my friend Generation Next Girl. She has an article. I'll send you the article. She wrote an article how they are going to be writing 4 more anti-Semitic bills, mostly because people, are waking up to the crimes of Israel and stuff like that. Sorry if this question's a bit long, but I was just saying, Slava, that to hear that, as a Ukrainian, you living in America, to hear that. And to hear people say that Israel, is America's greatest ally when it's really not. To hear that bill that is being potentially going to be passed, and there's going to be 4 more anti-Semitic bills. How does that make you feel like for the future of the United States? Do you think that freedom of speech in America is dead now? And how do you see the future of America's relations with Israel going forward? And what do you think the future of America holds? Because right now it's looking very scary. What do you think? And what is your reaction to that bill?
Well, I think the freedom of speech has been long dead. They have kept the illusion that we have freedom of speech, but we have been seeing signs of censorship for many, many years. I mean, first of all, the Patriot Act that was passed after 9/11, that was a huge blow on, human and freedom rights for Americans, right? Muslims have went through tremendous, so many infringement on their rights. It was crazy period for lots of Arabs in United States. And during COVID, we also have witnessed how, people have been pushed around, people have been fired from their jobs if they didn't want to get vaccinated and stuff like that. So little by little, they have been doing all these awful things. And usually they try to target people economically, right? Because they know economy is the most important thing. So if you can't support your family, you're going to cave in. You're going to give up fighting whatever you're fighting for, right? Because everybody needs to feed the family, put food on the table. So, lots of people did take the vaccine to keep their job, and right now they're targeting students with their student loans, right? They're withdrawing their financial aid, and lots of students have to choose if they want to keep their stand with Palestine or they're going to lose their education. So they're hitting people economically again. So it's not just about freedom of speech, but it's actually your freedom to live and support yourself financially, right? It's
crazy.
And I think they're doing this out of disparity because they're seeing that nobody's buying their BS anymore, right? They're like, they know most people are sick of their propaganda. So, and lots of young people, right? Before I was surprised, during, I'm sorry for referring to COVID so many times, but during COVID, it was the other way around. Lots of older people were skeptical and young people were supporting everything, right? So now it's vice versa. Now the older people in the United States, because they have been under all this, pro-Israel propaganda for so long, they're still supporting it. But young people are waking up, and I am so happy to see that. I mean, I was surprised to see so many like Gen Z young people, 18, 20 years old. They're all like my daughter, she's finishing middle school, and she was telling me that everybody in her class and in school, she's saying, and these are like 13, 14-year-olds, none of them are pro-Israel. They're all pro-Palestine. And it's so
That's
like
cool.
heartwarming to hear that these young kids they see through propaganda. So because such big numbers, I think out of disparity, the government, they're trying to pass these horrendous anti-Semitic bills. But I don't think people are going to cave in and just allow that to happen. I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful that we're not going to allow that to happen, and we will somehow stop them. And I'm hopeful not only because what's happening here, but speaking geopolitically, right? The United States has been, its empire has been so strong for so many years, but it's slowly losing its grip on the world. We have seen the development of what we call the multipolar world, right? Development of BRICS. So lots of countries are now trying to get away from this unipolarity, and they're trying to build connections and work with each other. And so when the empire is on the brink of collapse, when they see that they're losing control, they're going to try to do these draconian measures. Yeah. But it's up to us people to use this opportunity when the empire is in its weakest position, right? We should use this opportunity to break free, and hopefully that will happen. I am optimistic.
Slava, one thing is, like, when I study, and look, I'm just going to say this again. I've got nothing against Jewish people. You too. You don't have anything against Jewish people. It's not Jewish people that are the problem. Many far-right activists are going to take advantage of this, and they're going to say, Jews are the problem. No, it's nothing to do with Jews. It's Zionism. It's Zionism. It's globalism. It's Nazism. That's the problem. And one thing is, I think, Slava, is people are waking up knowing the fact how the Federal Reserve, the global elitists, the WEF, and AIPAC have so much influence on the United States Congress. Especially when you saw that girl Cynthia, she was a former Congress member, sorry I can't pronounce her name, and she was there's a video that came out like back in 2011 where she was basically mentioning how Israel has so much control over the United States Congress. Like, if any Congress member, like if you look at a documentary called The Israel Lobby, if someone criticized Israel, they would lose money. They would lose their money and have no chance, And all of these people, who we thought, like Jim Jordan, Marjorie Taylor Greene, they'll criticize Ukraine, but yet they'll praise Israel. And it's so fucked up how, like, part of my language there, but it's so messed up how all of that taxpayer money is being, like, how AIPAC has so much control over the United States Congress, how it's basically like blood money, and how United States taxpayers' dollars is going towards killing. Yeah, that's a name. Thank you very much, Tristan. That's a name. Yep, Cynthia. Yep, that's a name. Thank you very much. Basically, all of that blood money is going towards, like, killing Palestinian kids, which is horrible. And not to mention, this goes back to John F. Kennedy, because John F. Kennedy, back in the 60s, he wanted AIPAC to register as a foreign agency. And I think because of him, you probably heard about, I think because of, how he also wanted to get rid of the Federal Reserve and all that stuff. Because of him wanting to get rid of the Federal Reserve and him wanting AIPAC to register as a foreign agent, he got killed because of that. So anyone who speaks against Israel in Congress, they lose every. Like, how does that make you feel, Slava, to hear that Israel and how does it make you feel to hear Israel has so much influence over the United States Congress? And how does it make you feel when people say, oh, Israel is our best ally? How does that make you feel?
Well, I think because their interests align. So it's not like, the United States interests are different, but just because they love money so much, the politicians love money so much, they're being corrupted. No, it's the whole, United States foreign policies. If you remember how Biden said, when did he say that? I think in 88 or it was in 80s. Yeah. Biden said that if there was no Israel, we would have to invent it. So they, it's in United States foreign policy interests to have Israel there. That's their arm in the Middle East. Ukraine is their puppet in Eastern Europe, right? So they have these, these regimes that they support and they help, because that's how they are able to have a grip on the world and have control everywhere. So it goes both ways. So yes, AIPAC is sponsoring and paying these politicians, but even if they weren't, I think these certain policies would still be implemented. So like some people think that it's those people who confuse Judaism with Zionism, right? They're just thinking that it's just the bad Jews control all the world, but that's not how it is. It's the Zionism. That's what I call, it's a wing, or that saying that it's not the tail that's wagging the dog, right? It's the dog that's wagging the tail. So I would call, Zionism, it's the tool that United States empire is using to keep pushing their agenda. And United States politicians, they're also tools. They're not the ones making, it looks like they're making the decisions, but everything comes from above. It's kind of like Biden. He's not doing any decisions, so he can't even speak clearly.
I mean, it is pretty sad to see the state of Biden, because he really should be in a retirement home playing bingo. And Slava, not to mention, so I used to be a Trump supporter, but I'm not a Trump supporter anymore. I stopped supporting him back in 2021. Thank God for that, because MAGA is a cult and all that. But there was a video that resurfaced, like that was back in 2018 and 17. And not to mention, a lot of people say Biden, but Trump was like the most pro-Israel president we ever had. And he basically, and all of these Americans, right, say, oh, Trump's against the elite, he's against the establishment, but yet he earned $1 million by AIPAC. And yet he basically said that people should bring like the death penalty, he should bring a death penalty to anti-Semitics. And he's also someone who also said that, communists and Marxists should be banned. And yet everyone says he's great, but he's no different. He's no different. He's the same as every other United States president. It's just, the United States system is so screwed up.
Yeah, he's just, why they don't like him is because he can't keep his mouth shut. So he says things out loud that shouldn't be said. So that's why there is a big, movement, what I call Trump derangement syndrome, right? Because he's saying things that he shouldn't be. Like he said, oh, we're in Syria because we're taking the oil. Of course, like you're not supposed to say that. But he did. So that's why there was this.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think you go. Yeah, go. Sorry, Slava. Go ahead. Like you were saying, the internet just buzzed. But yeah, like you were saying, these people. Go ahead.
Yeah, he's just saying things he's not supposed to. They have a hard time controlling him. So that's why they would prefer someone like Biden to be the president, because it's easy to control him. And Trump is, he's not anti-establishment. He's just unpredictable. He's hard to be in control. Yeah.
He's just another puppet. He's just another puppet to the elitists.
Yeah.
And anybody who says he's anti-war, look, if he was in president now, I think he would be way harsher. I think he would be way harsher on Palestine, and he would probably want to go to war with China. But that's the American political system. Slava, do you mind if we could go for half an hour longer? Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to you also. So you wrote an article called, brilliant article, going back to the United States political system, called "There's More to Russia Than Just Putin," and you were speaking about how Russia has its political values. So about that article, what do you want to say about the article? What facts do you want to say about it? And what your knowledge of the Russian political system? Why do you think and how you think Russia has more freedom of speech than the West? Give me your perspective on that, why you think Russia's political system is better. And go ahead. The article you wrote on why there's more to Russia than just Putin. Go ahead.
Yeah, in United States, people who live here, they know a lot about their own politicians, right? They know all the differences between the two main parties, and they know all their congressmen and stuff like that, and then people like identity politics, so they go into details of personal life of the politicians and all that drama, which is so not important. Like I hate that stuff when people bring uh, drama into politics and mix things up. I'm like, no. Let's keep oranges and apples separate. Um, so people are familiar with, Americans was American politics, Canadian was Canadian, British was British. But when it comes to foreign countries, especially the so-called countries that are enemies, like Russia, China, DPRK, and so
Yeah.
on, people just know, all they know about DPRK is Kim. All they know about China is Xi Jinping. All they know about Russia is Putin. And they think there's nobody else. Putin is a dictator and he runs the show all by himself. And that's it. But just like any other country, Russian political system is also very complicated. And recently, in the past few months, some people might have seen news about Navalny, which was he died in prison. So he was one of the opposition. He was not the main opposition, as Western media is trying to portray him. They're trying to say that Navalny was the biggest opposition. He had a big following, and he was like threatening Putin's regime and stuff like that. Well, that's not true. Navalny and his party were polling at like 2-3% all the time in all elections. So they really were nobody, right? They didn't have much power and influence. In Russia, there are other parties. It's United Russia, which is Putin's party, is not the only party in Russia. Their main opposition was, and still is for many years, is the Communist Party, KPRF. They are always number 2 in all elections. They are the second most popular party in Russia. And there is some liberal party, there is some nationalistic type of a party. So there's many different parties, many different candidates. Like every election, it's not just Putin. People think that Russians don't have a choice. No, they do. Like these last elections that just happened in March, there were 4 candidates. So there is a choice. People are free to choose whoever they want. In Russia, there's actually their election cycle and the way they're doing elections. It's much more better than here. They don't start their election campaigns a year or 2 years in advance like here. They can't raise like unlimited amount of money in their elections. They have a limited, like everything is written in the law, like how much you can raise. You can't go over certain budget, because they want to create like somewhat an equal chances for all candidates. So they give them the same amount of time to campaign, the same limit for fundraising and stuff like that, which I feel like it's more fair than in United States. And in Russia, they have freedom of doing protests, rallies, parades. We just witnessed May 1st parades in Russia, which is the International Workers' Day. And in Russia, it's a big holiday. They're honoring the labor of the workers. And we saw many different parades and rallies. People were happy, celebrating. In United States, anytime people try to do any sort of demonstration or protest, we see like a heavy police presence, and it's just like, oh, you don't even want to go there, right? You feel threatened. But in Russia, it's a totally different story. So I would like suggest for people to like go beyond their prejudices and try to look into other alternative media, right? Not just heavily controlled mainstream that they always have the same message. Sometimes I look at like headlines of mainstream media and it seems like they got the same memo because even their headlines are the same. They reuse the same phrases. So I would encourage people to do research, look into it, and try to get to the bottom of it. And you'll see that it's not what the mainstream media is telling us. That's not true.
Yeah, that was a very good video you did, and I've studied a bit of Russia's, political system, and I'm just so blown away by how better it is, how organized it is. So, Slava, before we go, one more thing I'd like to talk to you about is the what's it called? The genocide, the Westerners that they accused the Soviet Union doing. The Holodomor. Yeah, go ahead. So, tell me the facts about it. Like, what are the lies about it, and what should people know about it?
Yeah, so first of all, the word Holodomor, it means to starve people, right? To kill with starvation. That's what it means. And this phrase, this word, right? It was coined way after the famine actually happened. It was invention of Nazis, and people don't know this because for so many years nobody knew about it. It was after the World War II when it started being circulated in Western media, and Western Ukrainian diasporas in different countries started pushing this myth about Holodomor and saying it was deliberate, it was intentional, genocide of Ukrainians. So the years that this is being attributed to is 1932, 1933. So this is before World War II, and this is when Ukraine was part of Soviet Union. So the part of the myth is that Stalin hated Ukrainians and he just wanted to kill Ukrainians. Well, first of all, that's not true. Stalin was known as an internationalist. He was Georgian himself, so he was a minority. He was trying to have this peace among different communities, different nationalities in the Soviet Union. So he was trying to have, equal rights for everyone. He was not trying to take away the bread and food from people like Ukrainians are trying to portray. The famine that actually happened had multiple reasons, and it didn't just happen in Ukraine. At that time, the famines were happening in Russian territory, so by Ural Mountains. There was a big famine over there. There was famine in Iran at that time. It was a Great Depression in the United States as well, and somehow people are forgetting that many people have died in the United States as well because of the Great Depression. So these were tough times everywhere around the world. In Ukraine specifically, there were some weather changes that, there were droughts. And when there is droughts, there is not enough harvest. Therefore, for a developing country, and this country I'm talking is the Soviet Union, right? It just, first of all, the revolution happened in 1917, but it was the end of World War I. It was very bad time for Soviet Union because the whole world was against them. Right after the revolution, after they started establishing their country, 14 countries invaded Soviet Union in 1921. This is called as Allied intervention, I think. They from all corners, they surrounded Soviet Union. So Japan from one side, Germany, France, United States, like all kinds of countries. They all invaded Soviet Union, and they were trying to bring Soviets' power down, right? So they were going through all this during 20s, and then towards the end of 20s, beginning of 30s. That's when Soviet Union started really building the country, developing. They tried to bring electricity to all corners of the country, build roads. So they needed lots of manpower, and they needed lots of produce to feed these people. So they started doing collectivization. And in Ukraine, there were these kulaks. Kulaks were the wealthy peasants who owned the land, and they didn't want to do collectivization with other farmers, and they didn't want to drop the peasantry in the feudal form, what they were used to. So they wanted to continue their exploitation of poor people and just hoard the wealth and don't share it with anyone. So there were these kulaks who were sabotaging. They would, instead of sharing and like doing collectivization, doing everything together, they would rather burn their wheat. They would kill their cattle instead of submitting to the collectivization. So these sabotages, plus the weather changes, plus the hardships of after being invaded for so many years and fighting wars, all this together, like a cumulative effect, I would say, caused the famine. But there was never a deliberate, like intentional, will from Stalin or Russians in general to starve Ukrainians. That was never a part. And this myth of Holodomor, it was started by Nazis themselves in Germany. So they had I forgot the name of the paper, but it was a German paper that started using the word genocide. Like they were reporting on famine happening in Soviet Union, and they started using the word genocide. And then the American media picked it up. What was his name? Hearst?
Seymour Hersh, is it?
No, Seymour Hersh is the modern journalist.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. Hearst. I think it was Hersh or something, but like you were saying.
Hearst. Yeah, I think his name is Hearst. He had a newspaper in Chicago and in New York, I believe, and he went to Germany. He met with Adolf Hitler, and he sent one of his journalists to Soviet Union to basically witness the famine. And at first, that journalist was just saying it's famine. But then after the Hearst met with Hitler, and they have made some sort of a deal. And this is the same guy who was employing Mussolini. Mussolini was writing articles for Hearst. So Hearst was like an employer for Mussolini. So he was collaborating with both Hitler and Mussolini. And that journalist who was working for, I think it was Chicago Tribune or something. I don't remember what was the name of the newspaper, but he was first writing just calling it a famine. But then after those deals have been made, I think in 1935, that's when they started saying, oh, it's a genocide. And then it still wasn't picked up by mainstream, or it didn't go anywhere until the Cold War came, and until the United States and its empire needed some like foolproof, like some hardcore so-called evidence against Stalin, against Soviet Union. They wanted to like smear them, right? So they were really in 70s and 80s. That's when this myth of Holodomor really started being pushed on American academia. So some Ukrainian Americans, from diaspora who were in academia, they started pushing this. They started making movies. I think there was a movie called Harvest of Sorrow, made in 1986, and that movie was like a big push for this myth. And if people want to learn more about the myth of Holodomor, there's a great book. It's called Fraud, Famine, and Fascism. It's written by Douglas Toddle. You can buy it from New Outlook publishers or some other publishers. It's available as a PDF online too, so you can read it for free if you want. This book goes into great detail on how the myth was born, how it was developed, and how they were pushing it. Like for example, the pictures that they're using, like there's museums of Holodomor around the world. And if you go and look at on those pictures, most of those pictures are not even from Ukraine. Like there are some pictures from Urals, some pictures from Iran, some pictures from United States, Great Depression. Like back then there was no internet, and there was no like reverse image search, right? Or there was no internet archive, right? The tools that right now we're using to debunk some myths, right? Like right now, if somebody posts something, we can easily do a reverse search image and see when that image was taken and stuff like that. So we can prove someone wrong. Back then in 70s and 80s, they didn't have these tools, so they came up with a lot of nonsense. And because they were repeating that nonsense for so long, for so many decades, that it just got accepted as truth. So now everybody believes that Holodomor was deliberate and it was done on purpose, but it was not. So that's one thing that helped me really kind of at first I was pushing back. I remember 10 years ago when my husband was telling me that that's not true, the Holodomor was made up. I was pushing back. I was like, no, I grew up listening to these horror stories, how people were starving and then I remember thinking, how can I even say that? Because yes, I grew up listening to those stories, but I grew up in Western Ukraine. And Western Ukraine was not part of Soviet Union when Holodomor supposedly happened. So how is it possible that my family members, my relatives were telling me these horror stories when they were not part of Soviet Union? They were with Poland. So there was no famine in Western Ukraine. So they made it up. They were just like, it's like collective hysteria. Like I can't even explain. I don't know how is it possible. Maybe they heard some stories from other parts of Ukraine, right? From Eastern, where there was actually a famine, and they just adopted it. And because they wanted to push anti-Russian propaganda, they started adding to it, and just to kind of have something to say about how bad Russians are, right? But the more I thought about, the more I realized that it's all made up. It's not a true thing. And now I am super careful when I hear about some historical events. I always double check, and I always try to find primary sources and see if people have any evidence, because without evidence you can make up anything.
So, Slava, before we finish up, is there anything else you would like to say, and where can people find you?
Sure, yeah. So you can find me, of course, at The Revolution Report. Our website is therevolutionreport.org. We publish articles. We publish original articles. We have some journalists who collaborate with us. We also share the content of other important journalists like Gray Zone, Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate. We share the work of Caitlin Johnstone and Brian Berletic and Marx Engels Lenin Institute and others. We also have a YouTube channel, The Revolution Report, where we do live streams as well. We also make like documentaries. So the two documentaries that were mentioned today during the stream, one is called 8 Years Before. That's the documentary that describes that period in Donbass between 2014 and 2022. And then the second documentary, which we just recently made, called The Color Revolution Doctrine. It's about Georgia and other color revolutions. And we constantly do interviews also with different interesting people. So if you're if you want to learn more, you can visit our channel. We're also on other social media. We try to be everywhere because of the censorship. Like we have been banned on Instagram before. We lost our account. We started all over. We're about to be banned on TikTok because with TikTok there's a big censorship there as well. We're on Twitter. We're also on Rumble and Vero. And my personal account on Twitter is Ukrainian Socialist. So that's my nickname. That's how I go on social media. So you can follow me on Twitter as well.
Well, thank you, Slava. It was an absolute pleasure to have you. We should definitely do another show together in the future.
Yeah,
That
thank you
sounds
for
awesome.
having me. It was a great show.
It was fantastic, talking to you. You're a very good guest. Everybody, please go follow Slava on Twitter. She's very fantastic. She gets great videos. It's brilliant. You can learn so much knowledge from her. Go following her on Twitter. And also go follow the Revolution Report. They're also a very fantastic YouTube page. You'll learn a lot about Russian history, a lot about world history from them. They do fantastic. Make sure you check out the Donbass genocide, the Donbass documentary they did, and also the Color Revolution documentary. They did fantastic. It's very well done. Please remember to go give them a like and subscribe. Go follow their work, everybody. And please remember to like and subscribe this video. Thank you for joining the Welsh Republic Podcast, episode 152 today. Take care, everybody. Please remember to like and subscribe and share this video with all your friends and family. God bless you all. Stay safe and bye.